Hey, everybody joining.
Hi.
Okay, it's just about time. And as always, we have a tight agenda. So I think we should, oh, the recording started. Okay, great. So welcome everybody. I'm going to start by reviewing the agenda. So as usual, we'll start with reviewing the meeting minutes from last meeting, brief updates from the PUC from Dominic, our first update from our elected TAG liaisons who have volunteered to provide that information. And then we'll check back in on some subgroup and other work that's been going on with the equity framework that Ashira sent out that the group worked on, the credit ownership proposal, and then discussion about working with the community engagement consultant. Then Ashira has a few other miscellaneous items that we'll try to get through quickly, and then public comment, and we'll wrap it up at 2:30. So as always, busy agenda, but we'll get through it. So first, I'm going to start with the meeting minutes from March 19th. Did everybody have a chance to review those minutes? I'm seeing nods. So if there are no questions or concerns about the March 19th meeting minutes, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to approve those minutes. Are there any objections? Hearing none, those meeting minutes are now approved. Okay, great. So I'll turn it over to Dominic for updates from the PUC.
Absolutely. So we don't have a ton at this point. The TAG did meet last week, and we'll have a quick report from Emily and Matt on that in a minute, so I won't go into too much detail there. Since the last meeting, the comment period for organizations to submit other thermal programs did close, and the PUC is currently putting those all in one place so they can be understood. We will have a version of them that we'll be bringing to the equity advisory group as part of fulfilling the role of making sure everyone can have access to this transition. So we'll talk a little bit about that under other matters, but we'll have more details and some materials to work with for the next meeting. One other relevant piece is S305, which is the PUC housekeeping bill. I believe we talked about this in our last meeting, but there were changes to the DDA schedule that was in S306 coming out of the Senate committee that got wrapped all into one bill, S305. Made it off the Senate floor through crossover, and it's been referred to committee on the House side. There is testimony on it all week. So the chair of the commission will be in front of the legislature to testify on it, as well as a number of other entities, many of which are related to the provision of moving the DDA date, but a number of which are related to other provisions in the bill that are entirely separate from CHS. So that is currently going through the legislative process. Things are moving, which is a good sign. Aside from that, we are still working on scheduling pieces for both dash roll and dash INV cases because the dash INV case was suspended. There's an order going through the second to last thread of approvals for the DDA and INV case. So hopefully we'll see some more out of that soon. And then after meetings with the TAG 2 weeks ago, and the department last week on sequencing and schedule. We are doing our best to keep pushing forward with that, taking into account all of the input we've gotten about combining topics and sequencing and making sure that we have the proper materials to answer questions as they come up. I believe that is everything. Does that bring any questions from anybody?
Well, I would ask if our group feels compelled to weigh in some way on the DDA movement. In some ways, the train has kind of left the station since this is already in front of the legislature and they haven't asked the AG to testify. But it's potentially an equity issue. I think if people felt strongly about it, we could make space to talk about that. Otherwise, we can just let this proceed with the legislature and see what they do. But I wanted to open space for that if people do have feelings. Okay, hearing none. Back to you, Dominic.
I saw Matt unmute. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't a response.
Oh, sorry, Matt.
Yeah, so this week, is just to the point that you just brought up. This week, there'll be testimony, starting tomorrow, there'll be testimony regarding S305 and the change in the default, when the PUC may appoint the default delivery agent. And already passed the Senate, so it would have to be a significant objection for it to stop the train that it's on. Because it looks like it could pass on Friday and then be on the House floor and become law without anyone. There could be changes, small changes, but the fundamental, the big change, which is moving the date of hiring a DDA from June of this year until after, or if the legislature adopts the rule and implements the clean heat standard. That's the big part of the bill, and that pass the Senate and will likely pass the House as is, unless there's objections that get raised this next week. Just providing context and color, that's all.
No, and that's good context. And in some ways, I probably should have considered whether we should have put this on the EAG agenda to dig into more detail. I don't personally think there's an immediate equity issue that we need to intervene in, but I didn't. It's an important thing that may have equity implications down the road, and I just wanted to make sure that if people felt strongly about it, we could still submit comments to the legislative committees. It's very late, though. I take your point. So unless there's any other questions or concerns about that, I'll pass that back to Dominic.
Unless there are further questions, that is my update, and I will toss it back to Ashira.
Great.
Great. And I will actually toss it back to Mia.
Yeah, with the agenda, thanks. There's too many hands in this. And I'm actually passing it right back to our TAG liaisons, Matt and Emily, to give an update of what happened at the TAG meeting. Thanks.
So Emily, I don't know if you want to go first or.
Sure. Yeah, I can jump in, Matt, and you can add anything that I missed or anything you want to add on to, if that sounds good. So the first update I have is that the TAG also took a look at the department's flow chart that the Equity Advisory Group looked at in our last meeting. And that was pretty brief. I think we were just briefed on what that flow chart looks like, and maybe talking about a potential review from the TAG of that flow chart when it is ready to be reviewed. We had a discussion around breakout groups. So using breakout groups during regularly scheduled meetings. So inter-meeting work done by these small groups. And also noting that only the TAG as a group can take action. And these groups will hopefully make our work able to research and discuss topics more in depth. We briefly discussed the issue of low income, moderate income definitions in the clean heat standard, which is where that income determination memo came from that I believe we'll be talking about later in this meeting. And then we had a presentation on the measure characterization study from Opinion Dynamics, the clean heat standard technical consultant. And they kind of just did a kickoff introductory presentation and briefly described the TRM process. So those are all the main points that I have for that update. Matt, feel free to jump in on anything that I missed.
Yeah, so that was the meeting where we really, I think we made some progress in terms of figuring out what we really need to figure out, right? Which is important. And we in the breakout groups, which so we can focus on very specific areas: biofuels, sustainably sourced biofuels, credit ownership, and pacing. So I think that was progress in terms of moving the ball downfield. And then the other piece is determining what responsibilities the technical advisory group has versus what the consultant has versus what the PUC staff has. And I think sorting out that flow chart is super important, and we're making progress on that. And the other is determining what we can or should be asking as a TAG member, asking the EAG, or as a TAG, asking the EAG, this body, to do. To that end, and this is sort of the odd thing, there isn't a formal request yet, but there likely will be, to discuss the concept of how we can ascertain and qualify the low and moderate income credits. As you know, Act 18 requires that 16% of the credits obtained by the obligated parties come from what's determined as low income, and then 16% as moderate income. Of course, all 32% can come from low income, but there's a scale as well. You want to go 16 and 16 as an obligated entity in terms of acquiring credits. And the question that the TAG will likely ask the EAG to weigh in on is, well, how do you determine that? Obviously, there's lots of different examples in state government and beyond of determining who meets this income criteria. The renewable energy standard, through the tiered structure, uses self-attestation. They use that a lot with electric vehicle incentives as well. Fuel assistance, no. There's a filing of financial documents in order to vet. Who does the vetting? Is it the obligated parties? Is it the credit? Is it a default delivery agent? Is it the credit generator, the installer of a heat pump, or the seller of sustainably sourced biofuels? These are really important questions, and the TAG is formulating a ask of us, the EAG, to help assist with that, understanding those concepts, and because they know the makeup of this group and the mission of this group might be better suited to tackling those details in full. So that might be on our work agenda, or the AG may say, no, that's not we don't want to do what you say. We're not beholden to the TAG, but I think the TAG is trying to organize workflow appropriately and sees an opportunity for input from the AG with regards to very specific asks. So that letter may be forthcoming.
Matt, I believe that letter has been received and was in the packet, unless we're expecting something different than that.
Yeah, that very well could be. I get packets from both EAG and TAG, so sometimes I get confused which one it is. So thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and just in terms of agenda, I don't want to, would it be a problem to move that discussion to now, or should we just preserve the agenda to stop with procedural issues? Looking to issue Dominic on that.
I think for me, it's fine. We're running a little bit ahead of agenda, so we might have some time.
Yeah, just go ahead and ask consent to move it. I'll note that, and we can talk about it now.
Okay, thanks. Do I have unanimous consent to move this agenda item up?
Can I just clarify the agenda item being the low income discussion, low income, moderate income definition discussion?
Yes, exactly. And then Emily and Matt, I should explain first, are you done with your updates from the TAG?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. So being unanimous consent, we'll move that agenda item up. I think Matt did a good job of framing that ask. And just for more context, I did have this discussion with Rick, the chair of the TAG, and I was able to at least, I think, explain to the TAG members that there is certainly a standard in place for determining what the dollar amount of a median income is, and those are income limits established by HUD. They're pretty universally used. I don't think it will be a problem to, and you can say if you disagree with that. I don't think it'll be a problem for obligated parties to understand the dollar amount of the household or the income that the households they're targeting are supposed to have earned. I think there is a larger question about whether income attestation or verification is appropriate in this context. You know, Matt kind of laid out the issues. I think there's a variety of different programs that are currently in place. The WAP programs like Jen runs, those programs use income verification. Other programs, like some of the rebates and incentives available through Efficiency Vermont, just require income attestation, not verification. So, you know, I think if we were to contemplate asking the PUC to require income verification along the spectrum, that would be, you know, a pretty labor intensive process. So, you know, I'm going to open this up to discussion, but I think there's an easy way for us to respond saying like, here's a link to the income levels, and here's a broad overview of who's doing income verification and attestation, and just explaining that income attestation can be a labor intensive process asking people for documents. I think that's like the easy version of how to respond to this if we decide we don't want to have a strong recommendation for the PUC to mandate income verification, for instance. So I think there's like this easy version, or we could decide to find a way to put this on the agenda and do a more involved response in how to respond to this. So opening up to this to the floor. Emily, you had your hand raised first.
Mia, excuse me. I just on the self-attestation piece, I agree with everything you said. So I support that recommendation. And just sharing, as you mentioned, for Efficiency Vermont's programs, we have a self-attestation process, and that's always our preferred methodology. Auditable income verification is costly. It's very expensive. And with sensitive customer information, there needs to be a lot of good security around that. So I think just, yeah, sharing that, happy to share more about our self-attestation process and how that's worked for Efficiency Vermont, and that we support that. And then in terms of counties and how that works, we have like a table of counties and some possible questions that can help clarify income brackets determined by counties. Does your combined family income fall below this threshold beyond this county? What county do you live in, to help clarify those distinctions? And there are some other basic questions that are really easy to answer. So just wanted to share some of our experiences.
Great, thanks, Emily. Yeah, I know EVT has a lot of experience in this area. Pike, I think you were next.
Yeah, this question segues into my request to you, Mia, that we put in on the agenda a review of the existing programs out there, which was on our agenda way back when, and then got pulled off because people were going to file reports with the PUC. Now that those reports are filed, I think it would be worthwhile to review them, to understand what other organizations are doing, including how they, missing the word, but yeah, determine if someone is income eligible. And maybe the best way to answer the questions from the tag is to first review what other organizations are currently doing.
Thanks, Pike. And yeah, I think I responded to you just saying like I'd like to know what the PUC is going to do with that, and it sounds like Dominic is from Dominic that the PUC is planning on combining some of that information. So I think it would be helpful to see what they produce and then figure out as an EAG how to respond to that, just so there's no duplication of effort. But it's something we should be mindful of, absolutely.
I also had a quick question for the tag members. If they could remind me when they meet so I can start tracking them again. I haven't been to the last two meetings.
It's the same week that the Equity Advisory Group is held, but Thursday 9:30 to 12:30, so 9:30 in the morning to 12:30 p.m.
I can drop the information in the chat as well.
Thanks, Ashira.
Thanks, Emily. Srini?
Yeah, I think there are two parts to this issue. I think one is understanding the population of the people who will benefit from this 12% targeted income levels for both low and moderate. And the second is really whoever, I mean, I heard two versions of it. One was based on self-attestation that Efficiency Vermont is using, and then potentially some energy group may be using to provide subsidies based on attestation of income or verification of income. So having said that, I think pool by this definition first. Technical advisory group and equity advisory group. How it is administered, attestation or verification, it's a larger administration issue. I'm not really sure whether we should tackle it right now. Let's understand the population, how it is going to impact, how many it's going to impact by this 12% number.
Thanks, Srini. I think you broke up during part of it. I think I got the gist of it, but if you're having trouble and this isn't a problem with the meeting functioning, maybe you could put it in the chat and Ashira could communicate this if you just briefly summarize. It was kind of in and out for me.
Okay, my internet connection may be bad here. I'll try. Okay.
Okay, thanks. And Jen?
Yeah, I was going to share that my program, the Green Saving Smart, does self-attestation. And I think the points that Emily made are very good, that in general, that's a good way to collect information without it being costly, and also without having to protect people's privacy issues. I know that there are some programs that do an audit of some of the people. So it's kind of a check, maybe a 10% audit, have a staff to do that, to see whether, ask for some income verification of just a small amount of the people that have self-attested. And in general, the clients I've worked with, I think it's pretty easy for clients to self-attest to their income. And I think in general, there's not much of a reason for people not to. They won't be kept out of this program if they're a certain income, but it will give us information about how many are lower or moderate income.
Thanks, Jen. Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in just to point out that Pike's piece about getting an inventory or reviewing that inventory, I think is important. One of the things that I added was two nonprofit associations that I work with. One is the Split the Ticket Fund, which is a charity for heating fuel assistance, and we just require attestation. The second is the Heating and Cooling Contractors of Vermont have developed a clean heat credit form, because early action credits can be earned as early as January 1 of 2023, 15 months ago. So all of them are using self-attestation forms for every heat pump they put in, every wood stove they put in, every gallon of biofuel they sell, are currently using self-attestation. Now, we understand the PUC may decide that that's not good enough or valid enough, but it certainly is current practice to collect these credits based on self-attestation. It's happening now already in the clean heat market.
Thanks, Matt. No one else has thoughts. So my proposal, and based on what I'm hearing, is that people don't have strong feelings that, there's a call to action there. Oh, and Ashira, we can read Srini's comment.
Definitely. So Srini says, understanding the population pool that represents 12% for low and moderate income is an important task. Number two, whether we use attestation or verification is an administrative issue. Not sure we should tackle this now. And Srini, if there's anything additional you'd like to say, looks like you have your mic off.
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
I think in understanding any problem, we should define the landscape first before we think about policies. So
I would just add, I'm not sure where the 12% number comes from, but it's 16% low income and 16% low and moderate income, 32% total, which the obligated parties must acquire credits for every
Sorry.
year. And then the other piece of it that was in the letter, and we asked, which is, this is for individuals, families and individuals, but certainly there are entities, nonprofits and the like that serve low-income Vermonters. And should they be, by rule, able to install clean heat measures, and those that provide it and those that pay for it qualify for clean heat credits? For instance, the South Burlington Food Shelf, if they wanted to make investments in weatherization, would they qualify for clean heat credits under that? Yes, but would they qualify under the low income, moderate income tier? Open question. And I think there's an opportunity for EAG to say, no, it should all go to individuals, or no, it could go to certain entities that provide services for low-income individuals, because obviously you may be reducing their overhead in their ability to serve that population. I think, I'm not weighing in on either side. I'm just thinking it's a genuine question, policy question, that EAG may want to provide input, maybe not now, but in the future.
Great, thank you. And Mia, it seems like you were moving us towards the direction of some proposals or a vote. Before we do that, I do want to open up and see if there's anyone from the public who would like to make a public comment. I believe before you, the EAG decided that if there is any substantial decision that you would make, you would open it up for public comment.
Thank you, Shira. That's fine. Yeah. Is
Okay.
there anyone who'd like to comment from the public about this? Okay, hearing none. So my proposal, which we can formulate in a motion, is I'm not hearing a lot of enthusiasm to deal with this now in depth, considering our other workload. I do think we could, put this as a parking lot issue, especially potentially the issue of businesses or social service organizations that might not be considered low-income households, but could benefit low-income households. I think we should add that to our list of future items to tackle, and that could be something in our final report or other recommendation avenues to the PUC to say, hey, you should allow for this in your rulemaking, or the legislature if necessary. So let's park that, consider revisiting it. And I'm going to propose that, if possible, someone from the EAG with experience in this area could write a short memo sort of explaining the current status of how that works. It doesn't have to be exhaustive, but just explaining who's using income verification versus attestation. And, generally some of the issues we just talked about with, making verification work and potentially auditing, things like that, without going too much into detail, but just explaining the landscape and sort of how this is being done. I think that might get to what the tag wants, and then us as the EAG could choose or not choose to make more specific recommendations about where the PUC could go with this with a later date. Is there sort of general consensus about doing that? And is there anyone who would be interested in volunteering to write a short memo and respond to the tag about that issue?
I'd be happy to potentially write that memo. I don't think that I have the information without the PUC's program response information being shared, what other organizations are doing, but I have what Efficiency Vermont's programs using self-attestation and programs that don't use self-attestation, and maybe some pros and cons in as much of a non-biased way as possible. So happy if that's me, and if that's not me, that's fine, but thought I'd put that out there.
And to clarify, I think you could say, EVT does this for some of the programs, and like the WAP programs do this. Like, I don't think it has to be exhaustive. You can just expressed that there's a variety of different things that are happening, and it really depends on the funding source, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's just going to be helpful to understand that for the TAG to understand that there's a lot of different options going on right now.
Absolutely.
That sounds good. I know, Emily, you mentioned the pieces that I said we're going to get together, basically some putting together all the responses we got on existing programs. I want to reiterate that the information we are going to be drawing on for that is all currently public in EPUC. We are just taking, 15 different spreadsheets and putting in one spreadsheet for y'all. Emily, as soon as we have that done, I'd be happy to send it your way to assist you in this task. And just to let everybody else know that A, this information is currently available, and B, we will have it or I will give it to Ashira and Mia and Chris to put in the meeting materials for next meeting.
Thank you for that reminder, Dominic.
Great. I also wanted to just read out one of the comments. Jeff says that he can also send Emily a paragraph on how WAP verifies income eligibility.
Thank you. That's great.
I just had a quick question. I was wondering, of the organizations that are represented here, in your mission statement, or is there some other way of determining which nonprofits work specifically with low and moderate income individuals versus which nonprofits, say the hospital, for example, that also is not designed to make money, but might not have a clear mission to work with certain low or moderate income individuals specifically. So I'm wondering if the current groups represented here, is there, like in your mission statement or elsewhere, is there some indication that yes, this is the target audience, your target audience?
Pike, are you just a clarifying question, are you asking that information would be helpful in the memo, or like in this meeting if we have programs that work with low and moderate income populations?
I'm asking if it was an easy answer, asking the folks represented here, CVOEO, Efficiency Vermont, et cetera, if your organizations specifically target low and moderate income in your mission statements or in some other capacity that is verifiable, so that we could better understand how to differentiate nonprofits at work or target low and moderate income individuals separate from any nonprofit who might not have that as their mission statement. And if it's a difficult question, just ignore it and we can deal with it later. I thought maybe it would be an easy question. All right, let's pass. Never mind.
Okay, thanks, Pike. If you want to email Ashira or myself, and we could try to figure out like a way to record some of this information or put it on a future agenda. I'm just trying to connect it to this immediate request. But I'm happy to follow up on that. Okay, so just getting back to the ask, having Emily create a memo and submit it directly to the TAG. She would give a copy of it to this group, but it wouldn't be brought back to review based on the understanding that we're all in agreement about what the plan is for her to respond to. Is there any further discussion or questions about that course of action?
Said one thing, and it just popped up in my mind. I think one of the questions that the TAG had was the percentage of AMI, how those match up with various programs, like who, if there's, because in the statute it says 120% of AMI. Does that line up with existing programs? I think, I'm not on the TAG, but I was there for the last meeting, and if I recall, that was one of the questions folks had, is to does that upper limit match up with already existing programs in the state, and how those would kind of, mesh together as the program, went on. So might be something to include or in your some small write-up, Emily. Just thought of it.
I think that would be helpful. And Emily, again, I really want to stress, I think this can be a fairly quick memo that just gets at the main issues and helps the tag move forward. And there's always time for us to submit a more complete fact-finding process or try to respond in some way to the PUC's inventory of programs. I want to move this off our agenda so we can keep moving forward, but not leave the tag hanging on this one. So if you're comfortable with that scope. So was there any other questions or concerns? I'm going to ask for unanimous consent to designate Emily to write this memo under the terms we discussed. Do I have, yep, unanimous consent? Great, I consider that motion passed. Okay, wonderful. I'm glad we were able to move forward on that. So now we're going to talk about the subgroup working on equity framework issues, and I'm going to pass that over to Chris. Thank you.
So I hope everyone saw in their packets the draft iteration that came out from the work group. And, you know, just to recap the process, we took the just transition from Vermont and we compared it up against the Austin model, identified that not all of the items on the Austin model was applicable. So we thought it would be helpful to combine that so it's more relevant to the clean heat standard. And so for your consideration, if this captures the direction the committee would like to go, we were seeking to use this as our standard going forward. And let me pause there. There were other members in that group who participated. I know, Pike, you did a lot of work, and anything you'd like to share with the group before we kind of look for a motion to adopt this?
No, nothing more.
Love it. Anybody else that was on the group?
Leave Jen and Ben.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I think we went over it pretty well. So
Jen's good.
Yeah, same here.
Very good.
Thanks.
Any feedback from folks, or is this something we'd be comfortable adopting and moving forward? Mia.
So my main comment on this was it says proposed clean heat measure, and I think that has a pretty specific definition in this context. And I don't know that so like a measure would be like a heat pump, which, you know, is a neutral impact. So I think we would want to expand this to say something like this framework or this action or something that, because I think when the tag gets this, they're going to be confused that we're talking about like specific measures under the clean heat standard.
Yep, that's
Thanks, Mia. I think we did replace action in some places when we just for that consideration. So maybe it would be good to put action in place of clean heat standard or measure throughout the document.
Great. And would anyone from that group be willing to take the lead on revising it and making sure that everything's changed to action instead of measure?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thank you, Pike.
Thank you, sir.
I heard that. But before we confirm that, I just want to make sure that everybody's in agreement with changing the places where it says proposed clean heat measures to something along the lines of action. Let me see, changing to framework or action. Is everyone else okay?
Now we're talking about all instances, which makes it pretty easy just to cut and paste, but are there areas where we want to keep proposed clean heat measure language?
I'll toss that to Mia if if you have any response to that first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some of like the health stuff, a measure could have a specific impact, but I think we'd want to keep it more broad across the board. So you could use this for, I mean, maybe it's a better, larger discussion to talk about how we expect this to be used, and what makes it most user friendly. But generally, I think measure is going to be such a loaded term in this context that we should avoid using it unless we are really specific about meaning a capital clean heat measure.
I think you make a good point. Yeah, it probably changing it to action would definitely be more applicable, across the whole. Like if a group were to use this to decide, if the PUC or the TAG or someone wants to use this, not only just looking at a measure, but looking at, okay, do we recommend a certain, policy, aka action, it could be easily just kind of dropped in that regard. So probably action makes more sense just for general applicability to kind of the whole process.
Could someone give me a quick example of, say, an action that would work that wouldn't be a clean heat measure? I'm having difficulty seeing the difference. Or
Maybe something like, self-attestation versus verification, or funding. Something that's not actually putting something that's like Ben was saying, like a policy or not a specific clean heat measure action.
okay.
Right.
All right. So saying that, I think there might be additional work that's needed in terms of the instructions for use. Mia got to that just a second ago. So maybe we should set up a time to discuss how and when this would be used and draft some more detailed instructions.
Well, I think this is I'm really appreciative of the group supporting us, revisiting this, and it seems like we're coming out with a stronger document that's more specific for the use of the clean heat standard. So it sounds like hearing no other feedback. Yeah, I think we're good to use this going forward with some minor word edits.
Okay, so will the subgroup meet another time, and that will be through the normal subgroup process, so meeting at least one more time? Okay, so I'll plan on you having that scheduled with Ashira, and we'll hopefully have that as a quick agenda item next time, and put this into action. Okay, next, I'm going to turn the, unless there are any other questions on this item, turn the topic over to credit ownership proposal, which Dominic will present. Thanks.
Absolutely. I just want to, well, I guess that we'll be revisiting again, so I don't need public comment on the framework at this point. All righty. So as part of the preparatory materials for this meeting was the staff proposal for a clean heat credit ownership structure. This is something that is required by statute for the commission to construct in consultation with the TAG. We also thought it important to have these discussions with the equity advisory group because of how fundamental the ownership structure is to the functioning, efficacy, and hopeful success of a clean heat standard program. My plan for this conversation is to give a brief overview of our proposal, as well as some of our major considerations. All of these things are detailed in the straw proposal document. Take clarifying questions first. And then I know Mia has put together a response, some of the thoughts, and then we can see how members of the group feel, and eventually hopefully move towards some concrete recommendations, suggestions, or notes that the EAG will be giving to the PUC to take under consideration in determining policy direction on this. Sound good for how we're moving through? Cool. So to start off, and this begins on page 9 of the prep documents, if anyone wants to follow along. I'll specifically looking at the second page, so page 10 of the prep documents under the heading Clean Heat Credit Ownership Structure, Staff Proposal. The overarching principle that we wanted to bring into this consideration was having the credit originate with the customer. However, the furthest down the line that we could get in order to give the end use customer the most market power and flexibility to make sure that this energy transition is least cost for them. You can see that clearly for installed measures. And sorry, I'll take a half step back to say the commission has generally been thinking of the categories of clean heat measures in 2 major categories, one being installed measures. These are things like heat pumps, weatherization, higher efficiency appliances, physical things that you put into a building and will function for a fairly long time. That is opposed to delivered clean heat measures, which we are primarily thinking of liquid and gaseous fuels, things that are brought into the home and used once, in most cases burned, and then a new delivery would need to come in to keep it functioning. So for installed measures, we are looking to the end use customers who awarded all the whole set of clean heat credits that are associated with the lifetime of that measure. Then for delivered measures, we saw a necessary distinction between changes that were being made on a system-wide basis for a fuel deliverer who's changing their entire fleet over from one type of fuel to another type of fuel, and instances where a individual consumer is saying, I would like a higher, a lower carbon intensity fuel, and it is more of a one-off thing. In the case where it is a system-wide change, the language we use in here is deliverer initiated, that the credits would go to the deliverer if it is a situation where a consumer is opting into we'll call it, a higher biofuel blend will most likely be the standard situation, then they are the ones getting the credit. I will also note a couple further nuances that we felt necessary to delve into. You'll notice that the threshold of 20% biofuel blend is called out in this proposal. From the research we did, the common perception appears to be that most heating systems can handle up to 20% biofuel blends without issue. Once you cross that threshold, more questions need to be asked for safe and efficient operation of existing customer appliances. The 2 other nuances that we have in this bulleted section is for clean heat measures impacting multi-owner properties. We would anticipate these would be larger actions and therefore would need a pre-arrangement of how credit is to be distributed. And then for natural gas utilities or utility in Vermont, the credit would sit with the natural gas utility as pursuant to their alternate regulation plan. So that is a overview. I want to start off by taking any clarifying questions on the approach we've taken. Yes, the overarching principle, as well as the deviations we felt necessary.
Well, I have a question, and maybe now's not the time to discuss it, but about the system-wide changes that you see that are being made, and how that would or would not trickle down to the customer level in any case. can you, provide maybe specifics?
What do you mean by trickle down to the customer?
I guess I just have to ask, what do you mean by system-wide? And you didn't use the word changes, but I can't remember what you said, so I'm going to say system-wide
Yeah,
changes.
the two situations that we were primarily thinking about was first a natural gas utility. When you purchase natural gas, you can't buy individual atoms moving through the pipeline. And therefore, if there is a blend of RNG in the system, it will be applied to the entire system. So that is one version of a system-wide change. The other one we were thinking about is if a truck-based fuel deliverer, instead of filling their trucks with we'll call it our baseline fuel that has no biofuel blend. Every truck that's leaving the yard has a 5% blend in it, and they're delivering it to customers as if it were regular. Or it is now their new standard. So they are changing every gallon of fuel they deliver to be this new biofuel blend. Those are the two primary examples of a system-wide change that we were primarily contemplating.
Okay. So I think Mia might kind of summarize what the small group discussed, and then I can make further comments after that.
Absolutely. I see Jeff has his hand up.
Yeah, hi. Just a suggestion for folks like myself who may not think in these terms or this is new to, it'd be real helpful, like, to lay out an example for all those scenarios, like what does ownership of those credits mean? What do you do with them? Just the context of all that stuff. I'll admit I don't necessarily follow all that. So, and I assume I'm not the only one, but if so, I apologize.
I'm happy to answer that question, Matt. I saw that. Yep, go ahead.
I think that's the appropriate question to ask, Jeff, and certainly those that are in the business of generating credits, and those that are in the thinking of getting in the business of generating credits, those that are obligated parties have thought about that transaction, how that happens. And certainly there has to be a paper trail. If the PUC, if this is eventually implemented and the PUC says, yes, you install weatherization in your home, you own that credit and not the weatherization company. The only way to monetize that work that you have just done to your own home to reduce your fossil fuel consumption is to sell that credit. You can either do that on an exchange that is yet to be designed. You could sell it to the person that did the work, and then they could monetize it by selling it to an obligated party. Or you could sell it to a for-profit aggregator that would collect that credit from you and every other house in your block that did a clean heat measure, and then monetize that by selling it to an obligated party. There's a couple of different ways that could happen. And that has to be determined. So, you're asking the right questions, but that hasn't been resolved. That is part of the program design that
Yeah.
EAG probably needs to provide feedback on, but we can't provide feedback because it hasn't been designed yet. It's been thought out, it's been considered and by a lot of people that think about this stuff, but it hasn't been put into something that we could respond to as of yet.
Well, thanks, Matt. I mean, that's exactly what I'm looking for, and makes more sense. And just having those details for those that aren't live, breathe, and die of this stuff, it would be very helpful. Thanks.
Hopefully not that.
So
I don't know.
live and breathe. Jeff, I think this may answer your question and be helpful for the group as well. So what I'd like to do quickly is run through each of the situations outlined by or imagined by these bullet points. And I'll talk briefly how from origination to retirement. I want to be very clear on a couple of things. One, this is a staff proposal. This is not the PUC's position. This is basically discussion draft of the current state of thinking in the CHS staff. And we will be taking this feedback and incorporating it into the version that goes in front of and is approved by the commission. The second thing I would like to be clear of is the examples I'm about to give are hypothetical baselines. This is how we imagine the simplest or most common way that these credits would move, and is not at all meant to be comprehensive. But for illustrative purposes, the first one we have is a installed clean heat measure. Let's think of a heat pump delivered to a single family home that is, stands alone. You install the heat pump, it generates credits. Those credits we imagine would most likely be contracted to the entity who's installing the heat pump in exchange for some sort of incentive to the property owner. Those credits having been contractually transferred from the owner to the contractor would then sell those credits. Be it directly through a bilateral transaction with an obligated party, so that obligated party could then retire it, or they could bring it to market another way, directly through a market that's yet to be designed, through aggregators who do not yet exist, or through a DDA whose operation details are currently being determined in the INV case. For measures impacting multi-owner properties, the distribution of clean heat credits once they are created would be arranged ahead of time among those owners. Those be transferred up through the same possible pathways towards retirement. For delivered measures, fewer credits are being generated per delivered measure because they are not getting the benefit of a lifetime of carbon savings. So for delivered measures in the first situation where a customer opts for that measure, let's imagine a home that has a tank for delivered fuels. They go to their fuel dealer and say, actually, can I get that higher blend? It's not the standard delivery on your system. I want it up to 20, 50, whatever percent it is. They then have the credit. They are initially awarded the credit. We would presume that the delivering entity, who would most likely also be an obligated party, would have an arrangement to receive ownership of the credit from that homeowner, likely in exchange for some incentive. Then they would either retire it themselves or put it up through the possible pathways to retirement. For a fuel dealer who initiates the delivery up to 20%, and I'll include in here natural gas utilities under some of the same system that I described for Pike earlier, they are doing a system-wide change, I'll say. Their standard delivery has a higher biofuel percentage or percentage of RNG. They would then either own that credit upon implementation of this business-wide change. They would then either retire it themselves or sell it up through pathways towards retirement. And then for a situation where a fuel dealer is initiating this change, but the biofuel blend is above 20%, they would need to first inform the customer and then ensure that the customer's heating equipment is able to handle that higher biofuel blend. Having done so, they would own the credit and then either retire it themselves or move it up through the possible pathways to retirement. Did that clarify things? Did I prompt additional questions?
That helps, thanks.
All right, and unless there are any other clarifying questions, I will step back and let Mia and then the EAG as a whole work through your thinking on this.
Ben, would you be comfortable summarizing what we talked about? And I'm happy to jump in as well if there's anything else in the notes, but we've heard a lot from me today.
Sure, I can attempt to. And thank you for sending over this summary of what we talked about, because we talked about a lot. So yeah, myself, Mia, and Pike met to consider this question and bring it to you guys. So yeah, let's see. The first one of the first notes on here was The memo did not consider what should happen in new construction with new construction of homes, and that are going to be installing clean heat measures. Would the developer own the credit or would the home buyer? Just kind of a sort of a random scenario, but one to consider. There was a couple terms that we thought needed clarification. We thought that the term customers should be clarified. We noted that it appeared to mean, individuals or businesses who purchase the installed equipment. However, we thought that it should be made as clear as possible to avoid confusion in different circumstances. One of the examples we thought of was, in a landlord-tenant relationship in which the tenant was the fuel customer, but the landlord is the one who's purchasing or owns the installed equipment, who in that case would be the customer. Let's see. Also, the term initiate, was the term initiate in relation to the developed measures was a little unclear to us. We thought it might cause some confusion in the marketplace. And it could be difficult to determine, to what extent a customer initiated a transaction. And also, that fuel deliverers will have a financial incentive to minimize the customer involvement, to claim as many credits as possible under the current straw proposal framework. Let's see, what else? Yeah, so one of the major things that we kind of, I shouldn't say major, but one of the kind of the points that we wanted to bring up too is that the kind of from a customer rights, kind of consumer rights perspective. So let's see. So we disagreed that the ownership of the delivered measures should depend on who initiates the transaction. We thought that, the ownership of the delivered measure should also reside with the consumer, regardless of the fuel type or who initiated the fuel, consumption or the fuel delivery. Basically all deliverers of fuels, regardless of type of fuel, should obtain the release of the credits from the consumer, essentially with some sort of appropriate disclosure of their value, before being able to claim the value of those credits. Even if, the ownership initially was, a brief 10 seconds while they're signing the form, signing the credits over to the deliverer, we felt that it was important that the consumer was aware that the fuel deliverer would be earning clean heat credits with the delivery, just essentially as again, a disclosure to that, to the customer. Let's see. For installed measures, the current proposal, we thought implied that for an installed measure, contractors would become, kind of financial brokers between the households or property owners that originate the credits and the obligated party. I think the thinking we had on that particularly was, let's say it was like an electrician, for example, installing a heat pump. That electrician is not an obligated party, but in that case, they would then be kind of liaisoning between, the electrician would have an incentive to get that clean heat credit to then sell onto the obligated party. So they want that credit from the customer, and that could, there could be some concern there, as to how, is there going to be kind of a standard practice as to how these credits are transferred, or, because you're kind of putting, that that contractor in particular, like, is all of a sudden becomes like this kind of broker between the two parties. So would there be any kind of normalization of that sort of transfer? And again, a lot of this was kind of focused on thinking from an equity perspective, and how we wanted to make sure that consumers and folks that may not be as aware of kind of this market that's happening, we want to make sure they're protected. It's not necessarily leveled against either party, but just like thinking about how that might go down. Let's see. The commission staff suggested that in the memo that the credit customer credit ownership will give customers negotiating power in their contractual agreements with their installer or deliverer, which could result in an exchange of incentives for the credit, which would likely reduce the cost of the clean heat measure to the customer. We just thought of it again one way. We just thought, however, under the proposed model, contractors or field deliverers will be financially incentivized to offer the least possible reduction in price to obtain the credits, maximizing the return which they can gain by selling the credit to an obligated party. A customer may then choose to select the provider that gives them the largest discount in return for their credit. This can't be assumed under the current proposed rules, but it is worth noting. It's something to think about. I think that conversely could have the intended outcome of making basically fuel prices more competitive in some way, but it's not specifically laid out, so there's no guarantee that outcome would happen. Let's see. The PUC could consider, making rules to establish that the customer receives some financial value if they choose to sell their credit. But the EAG, we, acknowledge that would be complicated to establish, what the value would be. But again, coming at it from a, customer perspective there. Let's see. We had quite a bit to, we kind of came up with a whole bunch of different scenarios so that we could kind of mull this over. Let's see. Oh yeah, so one of the big primary things we thought of was that we had some concerns that customers may be unduly pressured by their installer or deliverer to implement a clean heat measure for credit creation purposes. And we thought that potentially the commission could require installers or deliverers to provide commission approved information about the clean heat standard program, and what kind of alternative technologies and fuels would be included as part of the program, and basically general information about what the programs are available to help pay for the measures. When we were discussing this as a smaller group, I kind of thought about, if a customer is just generally unaware of the whole clean heat standard, just generally, and maybe may not be able to advocate for themselves as best as they could. So just general information given out to consumers by obligated parties, or maybe the commission themselves, would be just overall helpful to help establish the market, and provide, make sure everybody's on as level a playing field as possible, so we all know what's taking place. Yeah. Am I missing anything, Mia? There's a lot to unpack here.
There is a lot, and I just wanted to mention, just for clarification purposes, in the chat, Ashira shared my credit ownership notes.
Okay, yeah.
We didn't create a formal subgroup. I think we could talk about that as a group in terms of the best way to move forward. I tried to keep my notes clean them up into full sentences so it would be useful, but just to clarify, the notes say things like EAG thinks, and it was really just meant to reflect the consensus of us three rather than staking out a formal position for this group. I just wanted to cut out some legwork rather than putting it in complete sentences. So just to note that for the group. And I'll add, Pike can also weigh in, but I think we just talked about how this system really depends on customers using their knowledge to come up with a better financial value for themselves, or to make greener choices. But without proper information, that's really not going to work. So especially urging the PUC to provide as much information about the financial value of credits in a transaction, rather than just that the clean heat standard exists and you can get weatherization with a WAP program or something like that. So we thought that definitely more detailed information about credit value would be important. And there's a lot of other things in that note, so we can talk about how to move forward. Before we open up the group, Pike, did you have anything to add about our discussion? Okay, we'll see if Pike joins us later. So we don't have a ton of time to talk about this. I want to open up for discussion briefly, and we can get back on track with the schedule. But I'm sensing that this might need some sort of follow up. So let's keep that in mind, and we'll make sure that there's more opportunities if needed to comment. So feel free to raise your hand, but we will have to keep this relatively short, and it's a huge discussion topic. Matt, I think you were first.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a huge discussion topic, and it's really important that we get this part right. And there are examples of where we can see the good and the bad. It's happening in Massachusetts right now, not with the clean heat standard, although that's being contemplated as well, but with the alternative fuels program that they have there, which electric utilities are incentivized to. And I think what you're going to find, if you talk to the people that run those programs, is my assertion, which is a credit that is owned by the individual, as contemplated in this document, is valueless without value. No monetary value, no benefit, unless it can be monetized. And individuals either have to have an opportunity to access the marketplace, which is wholly confusing for them. For someone who just weatherized their home and is being told, now you own the credit, unless there's a whole apparatus for figure out how they can then sell that in a marketplace in which large conglomerate obligated parties will buy that individual credit, it's just not going to happen. And that's what we're seeing in Massachusetts. So instead, you either create the incentive for that aggregator or contractor who installs the measure in order to acquire the credit or own the credit for doing the work. And then they can, you know, if a weatherization contractor, heat pump installer, they will have, presumably do more than just one job. And if they become the aggregators themselves. Otherwise, you're creating a system in which you're going to have a bunch of people going door to door saying, give me your credits, give me your credits. Here's 10 cents on the dollar, and then selling it upstream. So it's problematic. I get the idea. Well, in order to get the biggest incentive for consumers to install a clean heat measure, they should own the credit. I get it. I understand it. I just don't think it's going to work. I think you're going to find people installing heat pumps, owning a piece of paper that they claim is a credit, and go, I don't know what to do with this thing. So that's just my cautionary tale.
I see Jen next, and after that, I'll go ahead and read Jeff's comment as well.
I really appreciate the comments that you all brought up in your group about consumer protection. And I think disclosure is very important. Education is important. But beyond that, to what Matt said, is you could have a very unequal position between a contractor and a consumer. And I think we have to start with the fact that many consumers aren't in this area. It's just not something that they're going to be dealing with, and it is very complex. So I don't know if you've thought about someone who would review the handoff from as the credit is given to a contractor or whatever entity, at least initially, something that has to be approved. Because I agree, I think there could be some very unequal bargaining power between a consumer having this and somebody coming and wanting it from them without them knowing the value. And to the point of knowing about other programs, I've had clients who have installed, say, a new furnace and were unaware of emergency heating procedures that they could have been eligible for. So it's not just the consumer being aware, but fuel dealers, everybody being aware of, if somebody can go get a free weatherization still because they're income eligible, they may not understand and still feel like they have to be part of some other system. So it is very complex, and the more that it can be open, but also understand that the PUC may have to play a role in the initial structuring of those kinds of exchanges.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Jeff says, agreed, Ben. What a good one pager or summary or script of the clean heat strategy and the players and the roles and plan, etc., will be necessary. And I think the sooner the better for those involved in these meetings and the public who are following it. Good explanation of the progress and info and ideas will head off a lot of frustration, etc. And then can go ahead and go to Pike, and then we'll come to Jeff. I saw your hand was up as well.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I had to step out for a few moments, so I'm not sure if this was already discussed, but I think it's worth repeating if it was. With regard to the system-wide systems, I don't know what I'm saying, system-wide changes that Dominic had described earlier, I think based on our conversation that unless there is clear consumer input and buy-in, no clean heat measure should get a credit. I think there's just a basic ethical premise that you don't benefit off the unknowing of others if they don't know about it. So, you know, so you see disclosure for affiliate links in Google and such, and we all now know the story about Henrietta Lacks and her blood cells who, you know, were reproduced without her and her family's knowledge. You just can't benefit ethically off other people if they don't know about it. So if Vermont Gas is putting in 5% or 10% of renewable gas into people's systems and then claiming a credit for it, and no one even knows about it, much less has agreed to it, I don't think that is an ethical situation. So back to regards to the system-wide procedures that are being considered, I think, no, they don't get credit. And they don't get credit until A, consumers have agreed to it, and B, agreed that they want them. Thanks.
Thank you, Pike. Jeff, if you wanted
Yeah,
to
I was
add.
sure. I was just going to say I could read it but I would just want to reiterate. I think it's a complicated subject. We're here for our equity abilities, not necessarily our technical on a clean heat standard. And there's a lot of public involved or following this. And I think the better we explain it and to get us all on the same page, because I would guarantee you read any of these documents, all of us were reading them differently, at least parts of it. So is plain language and clarifying as we go, I think the better. So thanks for listening.
Srini, I saw your hand and then Mia's, and then I do want to note that we are a little bit behind schedule, and it seems like it may be a bigger discussion than the time allotted. So we'll go with Srini and Mia, and then we'll talk about next steps that we can do to bring this conversation together.
Yeah, so I just want to offer the perspective that if this was simple to manage and administer, why is it not being offered through an agency like Efficiency Vermont? If you think about how Efficiency Vermont has accomplished greenhouse gas emission reductions, it's been mostly through education and the customer awareness and facilitating a mechanism for getting rebates for clean energy programs. And Vermont has been able to go only so far with that model. So what has been missing? The missing link has been the incentive with the end consumer and the customer. So let's not forget, I mean, if it is so easy to repeat, why doesn't this reside with agency like Efficiency Vermont to administer this? So I think the power is in the ability or the rights of the consumer to exercise their ability to make change not the fuel dealer or not the duty of equipment manufacturer in either. So that's all I would say.
Thank you. Mia?
Yeah, sure. My comments were also about how to move this forward. So I think what I'd propose, it seems clear that this is not going to be solved right away. I think we need to balance that with how to get something in front of the PUC sooner rather than later. So anything that we feel is really important is considered now, and then keep an ongoing discussion and a plan for our final report to address all these issues that we're talking about. But I think there's a real missed opportunity if we can't come up with points of agreement that we feel like we can urge the PUC to act on now, rather than giving them their feedback in a couple months once we feel like we've solved these issues. I genuinely think it's enough for us to say, hey, we're concerned about this, even if we don't have a specific proposal or plan on how to move forward with some of these issues. I think it's enough to bring some of these up. So I would propose, and before we make a motion, I'll let Emily jump in, but I would propose that we make this a permanent subcommittee group with the hope of getting some of these notes into points of agreement for a memo quickly. Hopefully this group could meet in the next week or so to respond. I think we'd have to work through how that could be approved by the group. And then, plan on this being a long-term discussion with multiple points of input from the full EAG for those who don't want to become subgroup members. So that's my proposal. Really quick, just because I want to make sure we get to talk to Curtis as well. Emily and then Pike, just weigh in on that or other issues.
Real quick, I guess I just, from where I sit, would like more discussion before the subgroup works this into a memo. I just feel like looking at the notes and seeing the recommendations for the first time, I would appreciate whether it's the next meeting or whenever we get the next opportunity, before that starts being reworked into a memo, we get an opportunity to really get into the discussion further. I don't know if others agree with that, but.
Of course. And yeah, just to make clear, those notes were not meant to be like the EAG will do this. It was kind of like this group and as a shorthand, but it was kind of a discussion of whether this was a work product or just notes on a discussion. So I think the job of these subgroups is going to be, how can we act deliberately and get everyone's opinion, but also act quickly and make sure that we're providing feedback at appropriate points to the PUC. So it's going to be a balancing act for everybody. But thanks. We'll make sure we have that opportunity.
And just before we go to Pike, I did want to check in with Dominic. Is there a timeline that the decision would be made, or a timeline by when the PUC needs the EAGs or would be able to consider the EAG's response?
So this is not one of the things that can be revisited time and time again. Well, time and time again, we only have about 4 months left. So this is something that the PUC needs to make a fairly definite decision on. As with everything that we do, it's not final until it's in our proposed rule, and even then the legislature can change it. So I'll say short term, I don't have a number of weeks. I would guess if something final came out of the EAG at our next meeting, that would be in plenty of time. Anything later than that, we might have to rely on the conversations had here rather than the explicit recommendations, which is, we'd rather have the EAG weighing in with some finality. Short term, I don't have a number of weeks for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dominic. And we'll go to Pike. Pike, I also see that you put a comment in the comment section, and I give you, if you'd like, you can read them out yourself. We just want to make sure that everything that's in the comments is said out loud so that it's recorded for
Sure.
future
The comment I
viewing.
was going to say verbally was that now that we have a rubric, I think this matter should be, we should evaluate this and anything additional that we look at down the road through our own rubric now that we've created it. And the comment I put in the comments chat was when Srini was talking about education and customer awareness. And I wrote, customer awareness and education is the reason Maine is outpacing Vermont on heat pump installations.
Thank you, Pike. And so what I'm hearing is there may be some interest for a subgroup to further this conversation and then come back at the next meeting when everybody has enough time to be able to review the things that the subgroup has talked about and come up with a final proposal. Ben, I also see your hand up. Go with you.
I just wanted to kind of echo what you just said. I think we should meet again, and I think like Matt's perspective on this is crucial. We kind of came at it from a consumer protections sort of side of things, but the point that there is no market without the obligated parties is well taken. I think there's a whole bunch of considerations there that Matt would be able to speak to better than a lot of folks on this, and I think it's there needs to be something, whatever comes out of this group, I think should be equitable both to customers and consumers as well as the obligated parties themselves. They're a very crucial group as part of this whole proceeding, and they need, they need to be considered. Just throwing it out there. So yeah, I think we should probably meet next week.
Thank you, Ben. So I will throw it back to the EAG if there's anyone who would like to make a formal proposal about having subgroups on this topic and give a little bit of timeline. I'm sure Dominic can help as well with the proposal wording.
I propose we
Yes.
create a subgroup around this issue.
Yeah. Sorry, trying to type up some language. Who will be participating in this group?
Maybe raise
I
your
see a
hand.
hand from
if that's
Ben.
volunteer. Yep.
I see a hand from Mia, a hand from Pike. Is there anyone else who would like to be part of this meeting on? Yes, I see one from Matt. This meeting sometime next week. And I see one from Srini.
Can I ask just a quick clarifying question?
Go for it.
What is like the subgroup going to be doing, and how does when we meet in the next EAG meeting, if we don't participate in that meeting, how will our responses be reflected in that like updated memo that you're creating? I'm just trying to think about participation in the subgroup and saying that now, or like, is there an opportunity not working in that subgroup to have reflections to what you shared today included in the memo?
I think, yeah, we'll have to balance writing this in a timely fashion with getting comments. I think it would be best to send comments to Ashira directly. And again, I would urge people not to consider the notes I've shared as a memo. We haven't gone through a deliberative process. It was really just reflecting that conversation and things that we could recommend. So I think it's a good starting point for the issues we discussed and potential actions we could take, but I wouldn't consider that something you feel free to say that I don't agree with this potential suggestion, but I don't think that has to represent the boundaries of what could be discussed. And I think also it would be good to say, to the extent that you agree with any of the note things, that would help, because I think we'll be trying to get as much of a group consensus as possible, even if we can't universally agree on things, in the interest of getting a response to the PUC that represents as much of a group consensus as possible. So thanks. Any other questions on this?
For the motion, meet to discuss the implications of credit ownership and what is the work product outcome?
Drafting a memo to the PUC on credit ownership issues and recommending further topics of discussion outside the scope of the memo.
All right, is everyone in general agreement on the principles discussed? Okay.
See a hand from
Uh,
Srini.
Yep, Srini.
Yes.
I think he's in
Uh,
agreement.
Got it, got it. Let me drop the proposed motion language in the chat. Those initials being people's names. MA is, sorry, it should be MW.
Dominic,
if
I don't
someone-
know. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I don't know that this should be task specific because we may want to continue the thread of credit ownership issues beyond this specific memo.
Very.
That
Makes
time
sense.
sensitive though, Mia? Sounds like we should probably, if we wanna, sounds like we need to, you know, put forth a memo on credit ownership sooner than later. I mean, I think we can still discuss it, but if we want to put anything in writing, probably needs to be fairly concrete by within the next couple weeks, sounds like, Dominic.
I agree, but I think this subgroup, depending on if the members agree, could continue discussing it beyond the point that this initial memo is created in anticipation of the final report. That's not locking anybody into it, but I don't want to go back and create another subgroup for more credit ownership discussions if we decide to keep going. But yeah, time-specific work product.
Alrighty, sent slightly edited language if anyone would like to make that motion.
You want me to just read that, Dominic?
If you so desire it to happen.
Yeah, so a motion to create a subgroup on credit ownership consisting of Mia Watson, Pike Porter, Ben Belaski, Matt Koda, and Srini Sinvarasan. Sorry, Srini, if I got your last name wrong. Quorum is majority of assigned members. The group is directed to meet to discuss implications of credit ownership and draft a memo to PUC on credit ownership issues and recommending further topics of discussion. All EAG members are invited to participate.
Mia is the chair. You hear the motion?
So sorry, I accept the motion and are you asking me to second?
Well, we don't need a second anymore, but you hear the motion, you would read it back out. Ben just read it. We would move to discussion on the motion.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Then we move to a vote.
All in favor of making this subgroup, please raise your hand. I'll try this. So in my opinion, the ayes have this and the motion is passed. Does that work for you, Dominic? Okay, awesome, great. Okay, so I think this was a great discussion and just a jumping off point for future discussion of how to do this the right way. So our next topic is the work with the community engagement consultant. Curtis, thanks for your patience on this, and I'm going to pass this over to Ashira. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mia. So yes, we have Curtis here, and thank you so much for joining. And this discussion was really stemming out of a want of people to kind of have some input in suggestions that we might be able to give Curtis, ways that we can, since the EAG is a wealth of knowledge in Vermont and in the clean heat standard itself, what types of different direction maybe we could give, or suggestions, recommendations, how we want to work best with Curtis moving forward. And I would like to frame this conversation because we only have a limited amount of time. So it's more of a way of starting to collect suggestions and potentially moving this into a subgroup that we can go into a deeper dive. But right now, a way of collecting suggestions so that we can later on have a deeper engagement with Curtis as well. And so I know there are a few topics that we can discuss. One of them is the upcoming meeting. So Curtis has sent, I think everyone should have received it, but the invitations for the meetings on April 17th, May 7th, and June 6th. And yes, so that is the main piece. But I'll open it up to the rest of the group for discussion as well. I know, Jen, you had a suggestion, and anyone else who'd like to speak. Go ahead, Jen.
Curtis, thanks for being here. One question I had was, thanks for sending out the information to all of us. Will there be transcripts? I feel like it's important for us to be probably aware of all of the meetings and what's being discussed. Will there be transcripts of the meetings? And if we want to attend, do we just sign up? I noticed that there was a limit, so I didn't want to sign up for it if we were also going to get a transcript or have some collective opportunity to know what was discussed at those meetings.
Yes, well, we intend to record all the meetings. We can have them transcribed afterwards, but there will be audio recordings for each of the 3 sessions. Keep in mind that these 3 sessions represent about half of the work that we're going to do in terms of public engagement, that there'll be other meetings later on in the late summer, early fall, and those meetings will be targeted to a much broader audience. The initial work at this point is really working with marginalized communities, educating them on the heat standard, on clean heat, clean energy writ large, and then to solicit their ideas. In terms of right now, we had originally thought about limiting it to 25 people per session. We're going to open that up. Right now, we have 12 already registered for the 17th, the first one coming up. About half of those are industry professionals, and the other half are either business owners or homeowners, private citizens. If it looks as though that we're going to have an overflow of the usual suspects, so to speak, we may ask some of the state agencies to sign up for, May or June.
Great. I guess one follow-up. Will the state agencies and their representatives be there to answer questions? When someone has a
No.
question about it, who do you anticipate will be giving the answers or be doing the educating?
Subject matter experts in the room.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
And we've just rendered Act 18 into plain language. But it reads at about 11th grade level, and we're going through the process of reducing that to 6th grade. And we hope to post that piece on tomorrow's. We'll send out another meeting notice tomorrow, and we'll integrate that language into that email blast.
That's great to hear.
It'll either be as a link or it'll be full text. We're still deciding what the message will be for the next email blast.
And one last question. Do you have any capabilities for someone to access translation services if English isn't their first language?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And that's something that will, yes.
Thank you. And my apologies, Curtis, when we put this agenda point on in full transparency, when we put this on the agenda, we didn't know that you would be here. So what I should have done first is asked you if there's anything that you wanted to update the group on. And yeah, if they're now that you have your feet a little bit more firmly in this realm, if there's anything that you wanted to say to the group or tell us about what you're doing.
No, I just said it all.
Okay.
Thanks. You know, that first one is coming up. We have 12 folks that already signed up. Half of them are from state agencies or organizations already in the business, and half are regular Joe and Janes. So we will, and I'm offline, I'll be in touch with Ben, who will graciously provide the graphic, one of the graphics. Sorry about my phone is going haywire. Yeah, so that you know, part of the visuals of the meeting will be kind of what the flow of the process is. You know, we need to figure out how do we communicate this in layperson's terms so that it makes sense and that will ultimately engage folks in this process. We're not sure that we're there yet. I think it's aspirational at this point, but even listening to the tag and listening to this group, there's a lot of technical language and a lot of legislative ease that banters about in the conversations that we need to somehow sanitize and reduce into basically core common language. So that's what we're working on right now. Like I said, we did a first reduction. Actually, we reduced the entire Act 18. And then we did, you know, our summary of that reads at about 10th, 11th grade level. And we're going back to the drawing board to really get that down to a 6th grade. And we think that'll be, it's really truncated, you know, from 41 pages down to a page. But if we want to communicate with the public, then we need to make it as easily digestible as possible.
Thank you. And I think the main question that we had for you, Curtis, and also the question just for the group is, what are the ways that the EAG can best support your work and the communication, the community engagement that you're doing currently, and what ways can this group be of best help to you?
Well, I think the first item of business is, what have you done before? What has happened in terms of community engagement up to this point? Either before, and this is about clean energy writ large, but also the clean heat standard specifically. What sort of community outreach has happened? I think I've read a couple of reports of community events, and going through those, there might have been a couple of score of events and contacts with communities that have taken place. But all of those, with the exception of one, have engaged predominantly white institutions or organizations. That's one focus group that we're involved with, but there also should be, you know, representative voices from otherwise marginalized communities, whether it's around race or around socioeconomic status. But you could help us by sharing your history in this particular realm.
And Mia, I see your hand.
Yeah, just letting Curtis know that I've had some interest from the Vermont Climate Council of you know, what the EAG is doing and also what the outreach process is going to be. I think they're following along in general, but the Vermont Climate Council has done some of their own work on getting Vermonters involved in climate issues and getting their feedback. So that would be one way that you could perhaps kind of review their channels and the way that they've done some of this outreach, and I'd be happy to facilitate a connection if that would be helpful.
Okay, yes. Already on my docket, I have meetings set up already with Joe Flynn, Juliana Moore, and Anson Tebbets.
Wonderful. So I'm sure they'll be able to guide you in the right direction. They'll have a good view of what else is going on in Vermont around stakeholder outreach and public outreach.
Yeah, we framed it as 30 minutes at 30,000 feet.
Great. That's wonderful.
One other organization that I might mention is VCAN, which is the umbrella group of all the energy committees. And I know they have a lot of outreach within their own communities, and particularly low income Vermonters are a group that I know they've tried to reach out to. And the other would be all of the community action agencies.
Right.
Yeah. And I think VCAP is the umbrella over all of them.
Right.
Great. Any other suggestions for Curtis?
Thing that popped in my mind was the regional planning commissions, the various ones throughout the state. They're typically, pretty involved in energy policy around the state. I don't know what their reach is in terms of, each of their respective public outreach, missions, but I do know they're fairly tuned in with their communities. So could be a good avenue.
Yeah. Again, part of the community outreach strategy is, how do we get the unusual suspects into the room? And I think that's, to dovetail on an earlier conversation, it has to do with, do I feel a personal economic impact with a new policy or a new process or new procedure? And so how do we render the new standard that would say to an end user, oh, yes, this is, I can benefit from this. But the whole conversation around credits and who actually can expend credits, that's a question that needs to get answered before we actually go public. Or it would be nice to know that it's been answered by the time we go public. Otherwise, I mean, we can certainly let them in on the making of the sausage to say that it's not done yet, but this is what the process is. And we don't know what the outcome of the process will be, but you're at ground level, and your input will help mold whatever the ultimate standard will be.
Thank you, Curtis. And we're starting to run up on that wall of time, and I know we want to we have quite a few community members here, so we want to save time for public comment as well. But I did want to put it back to the group because it does seem like there should be some type of channel for us to continue to work with Curtis and kind of get our thoughts around how we can best support. And so I think a couple of the options might be either creating a subgroup to kind of think through proactively what type of suggestions and engagement points of engagement we can have with Curtis throughout the next months of this process. Or we can also look at putting continuing agenda items on our agenda and kind of go through it on a week or a 2 weeks by 2 weeks basis. So I wanted to put those options out there for you all. And if there's any other ways that you can think of kind of enriching this connection that we have with Curtis, please let me know any reactions.
I think that would be a valuable discussion to have, like, kind of at every meeting, like sort of, not crazy long, maybe 10 minutes, like check in on public engagement, any ideas, because you could be walking down the street and see somebody, end up talking to them, and that, you never know how kind of stuff pops up in life, and could be a good idea for engagement in the future. So I think rather than kind of section it off into a smaller group, might be a good overall group discussion to have. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think I would add, I know Curtis's time is limited. I don't think you need to feel obligated to attend every meeting we have, Curtis, but we will continue to talk about this amongst ourselves. And I think you should, I think we can reach out when we have specific input, and you can also reach out when you have an ask of us, and we'll try to stay involved. I know we'd love to have you back, but I know there are a lot of demands on your time, and 10 minutes is a small period of time for you to hop in every time, but we'll definitely find ways we can stay in touch.
Right. And it'd be great if everyone could send to me what you've done in terms of community engagement up to this point from an organizational standpoint. That'd be great.
Okay, thank you. All right, so what I'm hearing is having just a check-in on each agenda. I don't know if that's something that we need to go ahead and vote for, looking at Dominic.
No, just to have the standing agenda item would not need a vote.
Okay, great.
Right,
So,
and if I can add, all future meetings, I would just pop in for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, however much time, but I would not attend the entire meeting. That would not be my intention.
You're
Makes
welcome to,
sense.
of course, but just mindful of your time.
Yes.
We appreciate your time. And so with that, Mia, if it's okay with you, we'll go ahead and go into our public comments so that we can make sure that they have the full 10 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashera. So now anyone who would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand and I'll call on you if you have any public comments.
And we do already have one that is in the chat, so I can go ahead and read that as a starting point. So this is from John McCormick. He says, in the March 25th special group meeting, I asked, where is the equity when a low-income homeowner having applied clean heat measures still has to pay higher fuel prices? Will the EAG explore this question? There will not be exemptions for homeowners who cannot transition. They might represent 30% of Vermonters or of Vermont's fuel customers. And John, if you have anything else that you'd like to add to that, feel free, and then we can post it to the group.
Matt?
Yeah, I just want to be clear here. I represent a lot of different entities, but when this was going through the legislature in 2022 and 2023, this very astute remark by John, I brought up repeatedly. We sell kerosene, the fuel sellers in Vermont sell kerosene to about 10% of their client base. So 10% of Vermonters do not have a basement of a mobile home or modular home. And they have to use the highest price fuel because they need a fuel that doesn't gel up in the wintertime. So they don't have a basement. And they also have exposed pipes underneath their mobile home or their modular home. And they can't easily use electric heat pumps. We asked for an exemption. The legislature did not feel that was appropriate. And this is going to be, for some, this will be very helpful. For others, this could be very damaging. And John nailed it. And I think I'm not sold that this policy will work. And I will advocate against its passage if I feel it's not going to work. And I appreciate comments like John's because they recognize that this is not a one-size-fits-all policy that is going to help all Vermonters. Some will benefit, some will not. It's very clear from studying this for the last 3 years.
John, if, well, we'll go to Jeff really quickly in response to John. I just want to make sure we have time for everything.
Just real quick, I think that's a good point that I've got concerns with, and I think Matt's got only one scenario that there's more than just that one scenario that this applies to. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks. Ashira, we hadn't discussed this, but could you create a separate record of public comments we've received so we can return back to that? I think we'll discuss things like this throughout our process, but it would be good to record in some way the public feedback we've received as the EAG. I also, encourage you to stay involved in other conversations like the ones Curtis is having, to keep having that feedback shared. Pike, I'm gonna just check to see if anyone else has public feedback, and then we can return to you. Is there anyone else who wants to make public feedback who's on the call today? I'm not seeing anybody. Pike, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment to the question posed in chat and to Matt's response to it. Matt's response was clear and specific, and that kind of information we can use to help draft rules or lead our work here on the Equity Advisory Group to solve those problems. Rhetorical questions such as posed in chat without any kind of specificity or without any example solution is not real helpful. And in the future, if comments could be posed as statements or specific suggestions, that would be more helpful.
Yeah, Pike, I don't want to discourage any feedback that the public has. I take your
I'm not trying to
point.
discourage anything. I'm just trying to pose it so that it can be more helpful and we can use it to solve the question, the problems that might be underlying the question.
Okay, thanks. Jen?
Yeah, I think throughout it all, it's important to realize that equities for everyone is very important, but the main reason that I believe this clean heat standard was proposed is our general necessity to reduce our fossil fuel emissions. So it's good to keep in mind persons or situations where a clean heat transition measure may not work as well, and that should be addressed. But at the same time, if this can move more people who can access clean heat transition down the road, particularly low and moderate income people who could do those measures, but maybe have not had the funding or the incentives to do it, it's very important as a collective that we look at the future and realize that this is a step we have to take in order to create a better environment and to address the really necessary measures of our climate right now.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, seeing no other public comments, I am going to pass this over to Ashira to close out the meeting with our other matter items in the time that we have left.
Thank you so much, Mia. So I did not receive anyone reaching out about the free pass to the Better Buildings by Design, and given that the meeting is tomorrow, I'm assuming that we won't have any representation from the EAG. But I would like to give one more chance to anyone who would like to go last minute.
Do you feel it's important that someone from EAG be there as a representative?
And if someone could remind me who offered.
I'll be there. This is Jeff from Weatherization. We have a booth there for low-income weatherization, so I was hoping some of you would be there to stop by, but and if I knew about the ticket, I would have probably taken it. I did know about it. Anyway, I will be there and happy to report out if that's what you're looking for.
Thank you,
I would have
Jeff.
taken it, but the weather's gonna prevent me from getting there, so.
Okay, no worries. Moving on, I did want to quickly go through our action items. So the ones that I've created. So Emily will create a memo and submit it directly to the tag, and submit a copy to the AG. That will not be directly reviewed, and that's a memo on the low and moderate income question that the tag posts to the AG. Dominic will give information on how things are done in low and moderate income currently in current programs and for low and moderate income. And so he'll send that directly to Emily. Pike will change the language in the draft framework from proposed clean heat measures to action. We will be creating a subgroup to talk a little bit more about the equity framework. And that will be, okay, sorry. There are two subgroups that will continue. So one is the subgroup meeting for the equity framework, and the other is the one for the credit ownership issues. And so the one for the credit ownership issues is Pike, Mia, Srini, Matt, and Ben, and they'll be drafting a memo to the PUC. The one for the equity framework is currently Jen, Ben, Pike, and
I'll come over
and Chris. And I wanted to check in to see if anyone else would like to join that group. Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Ben is going to provide the flow graphic for the EAG to the EAG and to Curtis on the clean heat standard. We will be adding a check-in on public engagement to every week on the agenda. And Curtis has asked that you send any public engagement that you've done or any public engagement that you know of to him for his review for his public engagement. Jeff, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. I just want to say, I think John McCormick's question is a really important one, and why I'm here to represent low-income Vermonters. And I think equity, there's a lot of different perceptions of what that is based on some comments. So I hope we don't just not follow up. I think it'd be a good topic for the next meeting, or maybe even a subcommittee to lay out all the different scenarios where people could be really compromised by this, whatever comes out of this. So just wanted, not looking for a response, but just wanted to put that out there on the record.
Thank you, Jeff. And I do notice we are 2 minutes over. Can I have a quick nod if we're able to go maybe 3 more minutes? Okay, see most nods. So, okay, let's go. Emily, your question.
Real quick, is there a timeline for when we should send comments if we can't make that breakout group for credit ownership? When should we send that to you and Mia?
Yes. So I'll send an email to the group about that. Because first we'll have to figure out when we can schedule the actual subgroup meeting, and then the period for comments. And Jeff, do you still have your hand up, or did you have another question? Okay. And for the agenda items for next meeting, I wanted to open it up to see if anyone had any topics. I've captured Jeff's want to be able to talk a little bit more and go a little bit more in depth on John's question. Are there any other potential agenda items?
A review of the programs already existing.
Okay. Thank you, Pike. Anything else?
Potentially, we had discussed with our consultant or that's doing the thermal potential study about doing a brief overview of what they're doing, like really short presentation essentially, and opening it up for any questions that the advisory group that this group might have for them. They presented in the tag, which was a little more in depth. Still need to confirm with them that date, the next meeting date would work, but just wanted to ask if they are available, would there be 15-20 minutes available to them to present to us?
Can you remind me who this, can you say again
This
who
would
this
be
consultant is?
NV5. They're the department's thermal potential study contractor. So they are nearly final. They're finalizing the final assumptions memo for their assumptions for the thermal potential study, and they wanted to, basically just do like a brief overview for this group to see if there's anything that jumped out, from the group's perspective that they could, add before they finalize things. But I'll connect offline with you and just confirm that they are still available on that date, which I believe is the 16th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you, Ben. Let us know, because that is an external person that we'd like to accommodate. I just would like to know for everyone, we are probably expecting a pretty robust discussion on credit ownership issues. I want to leave time for that. So I think we should submit as many requests for agenda items as you want, and we'll try to accommodate those. But I just think we always have more to cover than we really have time for, and we should be mindful of that. But definitely submit them to Ashira, and we'll do our best to prioritize and discuss them at a later date if that's how that's going to work.
Understood. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you all so much. That's all from me, and I'll turn it over to Mia to close.
Great, thanks. Is there anything else that anyone feels that we missed? Okay, great. Thanks everyone for staying a little extra. I appreciate your time. We'll all be in touch about how to move forward on the issues we discussed. I'm going to call this meeting to a close. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.